The way we see the world is changing. The way we see ourselves is also changing. A collective shift in our understanding of the nature of consciousness and of reality itself is on the closing horizon. We will explore a new understanding that describes the interconnected nature of life. This understanding comes not from the pages of some sacred text, but from the results of carefully designed experiments performed by highly qualified scientists.
I think that the understanding of psi as a real phenomenon should have enormous impacts on society as it becomes integrated.
Sometimes I'm asked why do I spend my time looking at anomalies of consciousness, and my response is when I give talks to groups, and whether they're technical groups or popular groups, my response is, well, why are you all here? Because oftentimes it's standing room only. And so the answer is that everybody's interested in these things. Who do you know who's not interested in precognition or telepathy or something? Because when it happens to an individual, there are senses that this isn't just a weird cosmic hiccup, it's something meaningful and important and interesting.
Modern experiments that investigate the nature of consciousness have made surprising discoveries that challenge every model of consciousness presently held by modern science. In a scientific community that is often aggressively skeptical to these ideas, scientists such as Dean Radin have demonstrated robust and replicable evidence of psi. Despite the controversy, an increasing number of scientists from a range of fields are now beginning to acknowledge and attempt to understand these strange effects.
I think that the psi phenomena are that crucial to all of our debates and all of our major philosophical questions, and are going to take us away from this purely dualistic way of dealing with the world.
I think the data are pretty much indisputably in support of the fact that we do interconnect, we interact, we're not isolated. My consciousness inside my skull, my consciousness and yours extend out into the world, and they intermix.
This is cutting much more deeply than most people realize, that we're not simply looking at some superficial curiosities, but this stuff is erupting from some very deep and very consequential characteristics of the human mind.
And there are hundreds and hundreds of really good studies of psi showing existence. And there are a smaller number of high-quality studies that start to give some insight into the mechanisms of psi or how it works.
A lot of psi effects appear to be in the unconscious, and so we get fairly small, although reliable, effect sizes when asking people to consciously get something. But I figured that if we have ways of measuring what's happening unconsciously, we might get a bigger effect. So that's how the idea came about, where you sit somebody down in front of a computer and you measure some kind of autonomic nervous system response. And then you present them a series of pictures, some of which would be very calm and others would be very emotional. And see whether or not the body somehow knows that you unconsciously know what you're about to see. So I ran an experiment like that, and it worked amazingly well. And I presented it at one of our conferences, and I remember a colleague saying, well, that's not possible, that's way too good. So fortunately he went off and replicated it almost immediately, using the same pictures I was using and the same mechanism. So that was 96, and from then till now there have been 38 experiments of that type using physiological measures, and something like 15 laboratories, many countries, and overall the results are extremely strong in the direction that I had originally seen.
Having information about the future is really incompatible with that simple, obvious view that emerges directly from the nature of human experience. If it is possible for someone in the past to have definite knowledge about something in the future, then either the future is fixed or the past is malleable, or some combination of the two.
It's a very important experiment. We're not dealing with an assortment of curiosities that sit out here as enigmas on our understanding, but we're really getting in on the ground floor of how the mind and consciousness work, and it's a long way from what the presumptions of the so-called exact sciences are.
If the physiology of our body is somehow in a dialogue with future states of itself, what does this tell us about the nature of our awareness? Could it be that consciousness is in some way blurred or spread out across time? Pre-sentiment experiments seem to indicate that the mind is bound by a very different set of rules than those presently assumed by modern science.
I have a mechanistic view of the world. I'm a physicist. My view is everything that is contained within physics. I've worked with these psi phenomena and found things that are clearly outside of the realm of conventional physics.
Well, for many years people have been interested in mind-matter interactions, and in each case we're always looking for a very sensitive physical system. After many years of experimentation, random systems seem to be the best approach. Originally tossing dice, flipping cards, things of that type. And eventually the field settled on the use of electronic random number generators, which are like electronic coin flippers. One of the ideas about what consciousness is an organizing principle or an organizing force. So maybe if you project some aspect of your awareness into that system, or you include that system in your own thoughts, that it too would become slightly more coherent. And so the fact that we can use these generators over half a century and see reasonably replicable evidence suggesting there's some kind of mind-matter interaction provides a major challenge to our theories about the way that we think things work.
This graph presents the cumulative data of all REG experiments conducted over nearly 3 decades by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, or PEAR. The statistical effect of consciousness upon these sensitive physical systems can clearly be seen. In fact, because of the sheer volume of data collected by PEAR, the odds of these effects occurring by chance is less than 1,000,000,000 to 1.
You are not looking at something that's necessarily some kind of weirdness in the world, but perhaps it's telling us something about the way we tend to look at the world. That if these things happen, if they occur, and they occur reasonably, reliably under controlled conditions, they're not paranormal. It's simply saying that the rules that we have for describing and understanding the world are not complete.
The future, hopefully, is not just repeating the same experiments again and again. The question truly is, what is the mechanism by which mind as we know it can affect matter as we know it? Where do they connect? That's the real mystery, and that's the question that the new generation of consciousness researchers, of physicists, of psychologists, really have to answer. The mind can affect the world in ways unsupported by our current scientific paradigm.
The data show because of the correlations. The consciousness is involved, human consciousness. That means that the mind is not confined to your head. It has a capacity to reach out and be in the world and to be part of the world in a functional and effective fashion. What's important is that there is some quality of consciousness, some aspect of physics, which is not complete.
The effects that we see in random generator studies in terms of the magnitude is pretty small. But in science, the important thing is whether something exists, not necessarily what the magnitude of the effect is. Because under conventional theories, there shouldn't be any relationship at all between what's going on inside your head and what's going on outside the world.
I often say it's a small effect, so small that you shouldn't think you're going to be able to switch channels on your TV by thinking about it. That smallness of effect is absolutely not what's important when you think about implications in science.
Even the small effects that we've been able to show in the laboratory are kind of a wedge into the mainstream position, still largely materialistic or physicalist position, that really doesn't work anymore. And science even knows it. Physics doesn't really hold to it anymore, but somehow it still remains as this kind of general worldview that we're all caught in.
Already the evidence shows that there's something that happens when very large numbers of people come together.
The Global Consciousness Project is an outgrowth of original studies looking at whether or not random generator effects involving consciousness could be seen in the large, rather than just one person in a laboratory. And it grew out of an idea that Roger Nelson had back in the mid-90s, where he would take a random generator and put it in the vicinity of a group that was doing something coherent as a group, like meditation. And I was replicating studies, and he was reporting studies, and a bunch of us were beginning to see these effects. And we got together one time and decided that we should have an ongoing study, so we didn't have to all get together and run our random number generators, but just to have them going all the time.
So the Global Consciousness Project was designed to look at the possibility that humans, when they're brought to a common focus of attention by a disaster or a celebration, that could create something new in the same way, a kind of group consciousness of millions of people, all feeling the same kinds of emotions in a kind of synchronized way.
And now, after 13 years or so of data, it looks like the answer is yes, that large-scale events do cause a moment of coherence, unexpected coherence, and a network of random generators running around the world.
We change the correlation matrix of a network that's scattered all over the world. We change it. It isn't random anymore. Those devices that are separated by thousands of kilometers are suddenly acting more like each other than they should by chance. The September 11th event is widely known as one of the things that's kind of emblematic of the Global Consciousness Project. It's, in some respects, the biggest event that we've looked at. And it turns out, in fact, it manifests the potential to change the world. We did an awful lot of analysis on that. Some of those analyses are just striking in the way the data look. It really had a correspondingly strong effect on our data. And there are some odd features, like the fact that at least one of those measures started changing about 4 or 5 hours before the first plane hit.
I think probably the relationship between mind and the environment is one of the big areas to be examined and reevaluated with the research that's going on, and that really the research that needs to take place.
We do have an unexplained impact on these devices, meaning that we do have an unexplained impact or influence on the world around us.